Charles Leclerc may have put on a masterclass performance at the Austrian Grand Prix, but it was overshadowed by bigger problems in the Ferrari garage. For the fourth time this season, one of the red cars failed to finish because of engine issues. This time, it was Carlos Sainz who drew the short straw. After his first win of his Formula One career in Britain, Austria was one of his most frustrating losses. So what is the real issue with the Ferrari engines? And what is Mattia Binotto's plan to reignite their championship campaign? Don't go anywhere as we dive into why Ferrari are having so many engine problems. Signs of trouble. When exactly did it all start going wrong for Ferrari this year? After proving that they could compete with Red Bull early in the season, they've been hit by a string of power unit issues. Their star driver Charles Leclerc won 2 out of the first 3 races, and it confirmed what many in preseason testing had feared. Ferrari had produced a monster engine this season that looked very tough to beat, and with Mercedes dropping out of the picture while they struggled to get their porpoising under control, Ferrari's main rivals became Red Bull. But it didn't take long for the world champion Max Verstappen to bounce back and win 3 races in a row. And even more worrying, in that third race in Spain, Ferrari's reliability began to come under the spotlight. Leclerc had beaten Max Verstappen to pole position by more than 0.3 of a second, and after 26 laps in, had built up a comfortable lead. That's when the Monegasque suffered a turbo failure and had to limp back to the pits to retire. But if Spain was a bad dream for Ferrari, then the 2 races later in Baku was their worst nightmare. Going into the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, Leclerc was trailing Verstappen by 9 points. Once again, it was Leclerc in pole position, proving that Ferrari continued to have a speed advantage over Red Bull. But just like in Spain, their hard work would be undone during the race. First, Carlos Sainz's car stopped because of a hydraulic issue, and if that wasn't bad enough, just 11 laps later, Charles Leclerc was also forced to retire. He was leading the race when clouds of smoke started shooting out of his car. After the race, the team confirmed that it was an engine issue that was beyond repair. New and improved? Newer is normally better, but it's also more expensive. Leclerc was forced to run an entirely new powertrain setup for the Canadian Grand Prix to try and fix Ferrari's engine problems, but those changes came with a big penalty. He dropped 10 grid spots and started P19 for the race. Each driver is allowed to use 3 MGU-H and MGU-K units, as well as 3 turbochargers each season. These are the main parts of the turbo-hybrid power units that modern Formula One cars rely on. After Leclerc's retirement in Spain, Ferrari continued to use a combination of used and new units. Then after Azerbaijan, the team refitted his car with new parts that included a second control electronics of the season, which was what sent him to the back of the pack in Montreal. Leclerc was able to pick his way through the pack up to P5, but Verstappen's flawless defense of Carlos Sainz gave him his 6th win of the season and opened the championship lead to almost 50 points over Leclerc. Between the 2 Ferrari drivers, Leclerc has been the one tipped as the team's best hope to win the championship this season. The problem is that reliability and team strategy keep getting in his way. If you are a longtime Ferrari fan, then this might sound familiar. Sebastian Vettel famously had issues with the team that led to a very messy divorce. In the end, it was the young gun Leclerc who pushed him out the door by outperforming him. But could the same thing be happening to Leclerc? Austria. Charles Leclerc has had a lot to complain about recently. In May at his home race of Monaco, a disastrous pit stop cost him a certain win. Then in Britain, Leclerc was again leading the race, when Ferrari refused to pit him for fresh tires, which left him in P4 by the checkered flag. That's why in the last race out of Austria, Charles had a point to prove. He did that by overtaking Verstappen 4 times to win at Red Bull's home race. But once again, it was a bittersweet win for Ferrari. They missed out on scoring maximum points when Sainz's power unit failed with just 15 laps to go. Sainz pulled over to the side of the track and managed to escape as the car set fire and tore up the side pods. Even the Ferrari team boss Mattia Binotto admitted that he couldn't bring himself to watch the final few laps of the race. He was scared something in Leclerc's car would go wrong. And it did. Leclerc's throttle was malfunctioning, which helped Verstappen close the gap. But luckily, Leclerc did just enough to hold him off for the win. And it seems that even during his celebration, Leclerc was worried about what Sainz's DNF meant for the future. He said, "It's definitely a concern, so we need to look into that and make sure it doesn't happen again. We need to get on top of this as quickly as possible." He knows that without consistency, these wins will mean nothing by the end of the season. Binotto's plan. A Formula One season is a marathon, and after the Austrian Grand Prix, we're officially into the second half. So far, it's been a development battle between Red Bull and Ferrari. While Red Bull have had the better overall package for consistency and stability, when Ferrari are at their best, they're untouchable, and Mattia Binotto is trying to make sure that his team's plan for the rest of the season keeps them at their best. Earlier this year when Ferrari started to stumble, Binotto had some pretty uninspiring words. He told the BBC in an interview that this year's performance was only a small part of a much longer-term plan, and that they weren't necessarily aiming for a championship. He said, "We set our objective to be back competitive in 2022, and it would be completely wrong to turn that into, let's try to win the championship because we're so competitive. Being competitive is one fact. Becoming world champion is another level of task." If you're a diehard Ferrari fan, this is not what you want to hear. But after the Canadian Grand Prix, Binotto was a little more optimistic. He was happy with how Leclerc's new power unit allowed him to recover points, and said that the team were ready to attack again. He also pointed out that Canada just showed how reliability was a concern for every team when Red Bull's Sergio Perez retired after a gearbox failure. After Austria, Binotto was still positive about their engine. He said, "We have a very good performing engine. That gives me hope for the future when we found a way to make it reliable as well." Binotto also said that the next few races would be about managing reliability, and that real solutions would take at least a few races to come up with. Deeper issues. At the start of the season, it seemed clear that Ferrari had the engine advantage. It was miles ahead of Mercedes and Mercedes customer teams of McLaren and Williams. This advantage was seen in the massive boost in performance of the Ferrari-powered Haas and Alfa Romeo as well. But at the midpoint of the season, this edge might be wearing out. At the Spanish Grand Prix, just one lap after Charles Leclerc retired, Alfa Romeo's Zhou Guanyu pulled out with a loss of engine power. Then again in Azerbaijan, another one of Ferrari's customers had similar issues. Haas driver Kevin Magnussen's power unit failed. In his post-race interview, Magnussen expressed his frustration. "Today again, we were in a position to score points, so I'm not really worried about performance. I'm just more worried about the reliability." None of this is good news for the team at the Ferrari factory. And if this wasn't bad enough, Haas had another problem at the Canadian Grand Prix, when Magnussen's teammate Mick Schumacher retired on the 17th lap. Once again, it was an engine failure. Haas were able to bounce back in Austria, with Mick Schumacher battling Lewis Hamilton all weekend and finishing in P6 on Sunday. Meanwhile, Kevin Magnussen finished in P8, but once again said that he was concerned about the engine. "It was a slight issue that didn't make me feel so good, because I was getting very nervous it would blow up. It's not the first time this year." When asked about the reliability concerns that Ferrari power units were facing, Mattia Binotto said that he would prefer performance over reliability. The Ferrari boss may feel that way, but at this point, some of his customers might just want to finish each race. A step too far? Ferrari is the most valuable Formula One team in the world. The prancing horses are iconic, even for people who have never watched a race. But the last time they won a championship was in 2008, and their high point in the last 5 years was filled with controversy. 4 years into the turbo hybrid era in 2018, Ferrari were getting used to getting dominated by a superior Mercedes engine. But after the summer break of the 2019 season, Ferrari emerged with a lightning-quick power unit. Their primary rivals, Red Bull and Mercedes, were suspicious of this sudden boost in power, and the FIA launched an investigation. The results of that investigation were kept private after the FIA came to an agreement with Ferrari. But what's for sure is that by 2020, Ferrari's pace had dropped off again. It's thought that this is because of a technical directive aimed at fuel consumption. All the FIA would say was that part of the agreement involved Ferrari helping the FIA with testing the brand new E10 fuel that was introduced this year, and some commentators believe that this could be one of the secrets behind Ferrari's competitiveness this year. At least, that's what former driver Mark Surer thinks. He said, "Maybe the conditions Ferrari got from the FIA 3 years ago have been an advantage for the 2022 engines, which are partly fueled with E10 petrol. It may be that Ferrari was best able to cope with this innovation through early research. But it's not a big surprise that Ferrari are strong this year. They made it clear last year that their main focus was the 2022 model. But no matter how they got their powers, this is Ferrari's best shot they've had in years." Do you think that Ferrari's tests with the FIA may have given them advantage? Or were they just more ready for the new regulations? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe if you want more great Formula One content.